Hello, this is Lesson 5, Part 1. We're going to be talking about reshaping paths in Part 1 and the pen tool in Part 2. Reshaping paths and the pen tool is really where we get to start working with our objects and shaping the objects as we desire them to be. Most of the designs that you're working with obviously will not be working with simple rectangles or simple ellipses. You'll be needing to make much more sophisticated designs than something that would only call for rectangles. So let's have a look and see how we can do that. Okay, I'm going to start by showing you guys the parts of a path. I've already shown you guys a little bit of this, but I do want to show you some more. So I'm going to first draw a couple of objects. And I'm going to give those a white fill and a black stroke. And let me just increase that stroke so you can see it better. Now when I use my regular selection tool and I select an object, it puts the path and the anchor points of that object already on my highlighted path for the selection. And it does that for an object with curves or an object with only straight lines. When I use my direct selection tool, it only selects the individual point. And when I select a point on an object with curved paths, you'll see that it comes up with these things on it. Those are called direction lines. And I'm going to show you how to use those. When I use my regular selection tool, I can select an individual point and I can move that point. I can do my arrow keys, which is what I'm doing right now. I can also simply click and drag that direction or that anchor point, sorry. And these are called corner anchor points. When they are on an object that is, or when they have two straight lines coming off of them, this is called a corner anchor point. And a corner anchor point has straight segments or straight paths attached to it. When I go to an object such as my ellipse down here and I select an anchor point, this anchor point is called a smooth anchor point. And a smooth anchor point can be moved the same way that you can move any other anchor point with your arrow keys or by clicking and dragging. But it also has another set of changes that can be made, and that is with the direction lines. The direction lines have handles at the end of those, and you can grab a handle and you can change the slope of the path. Now the longer your handle, the steeper the path. The shorter the handle, the softer the path, the softer that curve. Okay, and you can change the direction of your curve. And again, using the length of your handle or the length of your direction line, you can change what the curve looks like. So you want to experiment with this a little bit because this gives you a lot more control over your objects once you can start changing some of these things. You go from very, very simple ellipses and rectangles to something a little more interesting and a lot more exciting to work with. Now there's a couple different ways that you can reshape your objects. One is the way that I was just showing you by simply using your direct selection tool. Very important that you use this tool. By selecting a point and by changing what that anchor point looks like. Okay, this is one way of reshaping your paths. There's another way to reshape your paths that I find really useful, and that's using your reshape tool. Now to use your reshape tool, you start with your regular direct selection tool, and I always start by clicking on the background so nothing is selected, and then I select the path, that is the path, not the point, but the path that I want to reshape. So I'm going to click on my path. Then I'm going to go to my reshape tool, which is right under here, and remember that tear off function if you want to use it. Go to your reshape tool, and then I go to the path that I want to reshape, and I click and I drag down on that path. And this places a new smooth anchor point in the middle of this path, which allows me to change what this looks like. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that. I start with my direct selection tool and I click on the background so nothing is selected. Then I select the path that I wish to reshape. Then I select my Reshape tool, and then I click and I drag on the path that I want to reshape. And that's using the Reshape tool. This is a really powerful tool to use. You can see what kind of the changes that you can start making to your paths. And once you have reshaped your path, if you need to fine-tune that, you simply go back to your direct selection tool and you change these points just as you do at any other point in time. And you'll see that I can add additional changes to this. It becomes a pretty powerful tool when you start playing with some of these things. Alright, I'm going to pause here and I'm going to go on to part 2 of lesson 5, and that is using the pen tool.